Hi, my name is Florent Farges. Today let's talk about mediums in oil painting. I get a lot of questions about the mediums I use for oil painting, and this is not surprising as it can be a very complex subject. It gets even more complicated if you heard that as an oil painter, you're supposed to paint fat over lean. When it comes to painting, I always like to really understand what I do, so this video will not be a simple list of ingredients, and I will try to make a more complete explanation. So, to really understand what a medium does, we first need to explain what's behind the fat over lean principle. This part is pretty technical, but I think it's still important to know so that you can make informed decisions and not follow instructions blindly. First, let's try to understand how oil dries. And let's start by saying that contrary to what we say all the time, oil doesn't dry. Technically, drying is the evaporation of water, but there's no water in oil. What happens is not drying, but hardening, and what makes oil paint harden is a chemical reaction called polymerization. So let's make it as simple as possible. Here are the pigments. They need a vehicle, a fluid, in which they can be mixed that helps them spread and hardens after a while. This vehicle can be called the medium. Of course, we often think about the medium as an additive to the oil paint, but in the first sense of the term, the oil contained in your paint tube is already a medium. So let's see what oil does. Oil is composed of long fatty acid chains. The reaction of polymerization occurs in the presence of dioxygen. When the molecules of dioxygen penetrate the oil film, it creates bonds between the fatty acid chains, turning the substrate into a solid and durable film. The fat over lean rule exists for two reasons. When an oil film hardens, the structure of its surface changes, and a fat paint film hardens slower than a lean paint film. Let's have an example of a painter who doesn't follow the fat over lean rule. On the bottom layer, the substrate contains a lot of oil. The top layer hardens first. Its structure changes. It creates a solid film. At this stage, the bottom layer is locked under the top layer, but dioxygen can still penetrate through both layers. The reaction is still happening. After a certain time, the bottom layer hardens, thus changing its physical structure. The tensions and distortions happening on the bottom layer cause too much stress for the non-flexible upper layer. These tensions may be weak and microscopic, but on the scale of the whole canvas, they will create unrepairable crackings on the top layer. To avoid this, the solution is to have the fatter layers on top of the leaner layers. We commonly say fat over lean, but in fact it is more flexible on top of non-flexible. So what does a medium do? A medium is added to change the properties of the paint. You can change the oil content, the drying time, the consistency, or finally you can change the luster. Your local art supply store is probably filled with all sorts of oil paint additives. Usually you can find ready-made mediums, but it's not necessarily a good idea. I don't advise the use of ready-made products because for most of them, the manufacturers don't reveal the exact ingredients and proportions. Remember, a good medium is a medium that you can modify to suit your needs. It's not really hard to create your own recipe, and this is the best way to get exactly what you want. I give you suggestions based on the recipes that I've tried, but again, you're the only one who knows what suits your technique. A lot of very complex and refined recipes for mediums exist, but for this video, I just want to focus on simple and efficient recipes. Remember that no medium will make miracles. What matters is how you control it and make it suit your paint style. The basic medium recipes can be created out of four main types of ingredients: oil, solvent or thinner, varnish, and dryer or secatives. You can find a lot more ingredients to use: wax, resins, or egg, but again, in my opinion, it's best to learn how to use simple mediums first, and then, to answer a very specific need, switch to more complex preparations. You have to keep in mind that the success of a medium doesn't come from the recipe, but from the way it's used. Let's have a look at 3 solutions. So the first recipe is fairly simple. It is very basic, but works well. Just mix 1/3 linseed stand oil with 2/3 odorless mineral spirit. You can either use purified linseed oil or linseed stand oil. The drawback of normal linseed oil is that it has a tendency to yellow over time. Linseed stand oil has a honey-like consistency and yellows less than regular linseed oil. Don't hesitate to change the oil to spirit ratio and experiment to find what you need. This next recipe uses varnish to create a little bit more depth. It comes from Ralph Myers, the Artist Handbook of Materials and Techniques. It's 1 part stand oil, 1 part Demar varnish, 5 parts turpentine, and a few drops of secative. I present this recipe because it's kind of a classic, but I don't use it anymore, as I react pretty badly to turpentine gum. And the addition of a varnish and secative is not really what I am looking for anyway, but it's still a good medium. Third solution, use an alkyd. It comes ready to use, and it's a lot different than the preparations we've seen before. It's made out of a synthetic resin modified with oil. It has a lot of nice features. It dries very fast, it doesn't turn yellow, and it brings a nice gloss. The best quality is that it has an awesome thixotropic texture, which means that it has a gel-like consistency while it's left untouched, but becomes more fluid when you spread it. According to the manufacturers, with this product you don't really have to worry about the fat over lean rule, because supposedly it is more flexible than regular oil when it dries. Just try to use increasing amounts in your paint as you go on. They also state that it can be diluted with odorless mineral spirits. They also come in a nice range of products so that you can paint either impasto or very fluid. These alkyd mediums are nice and a lot of oil painters love them, but I don't use them anymore for several reasons. 1, they are too glossy for my taste. 2, they dry a little bit too fast. And 3, I can stand the fumes. They make me really sick, even more than turpentine. See, that's the problem with mediums. They all contain solvents that are pretty bad for your lungs. So always use in reasonable quantities and paint in a well-ventilated place. I would really like to have a solvent-free alternative to give you, but I haven't found anything so far. Apparently, there is a solvent-free medium made out of walnut oil, but unfortunately it's not sold in my country, so I can't tell about it. Now comes the most important part of this tutorial. It doesn't matter what kind of medium you have if you don't know how to use it properly. Now, as we said in the beginning, you have to follow the fat over lean rule. There are 2 main approaches for that. The first approach uses the same medium in varying quantities. You always keep the same medium, but change the quantity. The more medium you add, the fatter it gets. In the initial layers, add a very small amount of medium, then increase the amount of painting medium as you build up layers. However, this approach is not the one I recommend, because you don't really get to choose how much medium you use. So the second approach is the one I recommend. It uses several mixtures with varying fat content, but the ratio of the painting medium to oil colors remain the same. Contrary to the first one, you always use the same quantity of medium, it's just the fat content that changes. But now that your mediums are ready, how do you apply it and mix it to the paint? Some people prefer to just dip their brush in the medium and go on with the painting this way. But your brush doesn't always absorb the same quantity of medium, so this will create a very uneven distribution of medium and can lead to problems. Some artists use another technique. They take a clean brush and spread a thin layer of the medium onto the area of the painting that they will be working on. Then, they paint straight out of the tube directly into this wet layer of medium. The best method is to mix the medium to the paint every time you prepare your palette. This is how I do it. After laying out my colors, I take my palette knife and drop 1 or 2 drops of medium into each pile of paint. In general, the stacks should have the size of a nut. 1 or 2 drops are enough. Don't overuse the medium or you will have a paint that is too fluid and runny. After I've dropped the medium onto my piles of paint, I stir the medium with my palette knife. I don't forget to clean the knife between colors. You can always keep a little drop of medium on the side, just in case you need it. And finally, let's see some useful tips. Don't prepare too much medium at once. It's not useful and the properties of certain mediums age badly. Never use too much medium, a little drop is enough. Avoid excess and everything should be fine. If you really want it, there's nothing wrong with using pure solvent or pure oil as a medium. But pure solvent dries very matte and brittle, and pure oil can take a very long time to dry. Try to find a nice balance and avoid excesses of any kind. It's not advisable to use several mediums of different nature in the same painting. And last but not least, mediums are not meant to fix a bad painting. If you had something wrong with your painting, consider first that the problem might come from your canvas quality, your paint, or from bad brush work. Alright, that's it. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment in the section below, and see you next time. Bye!